on my mind a lot. Don't need no time watch. I don't know how I got you in my parking spot. Yeah, that's babe, need you every day. You like my oxygen, make it seem like the barging down. Got my heart no barging in. From the bed to the floor to the couch. Might wake the neighbors up.
They came to us with this and ended up with this. And today I'm gonna tell you exactly how we did it. How we approached a redesign like that, when do you use type framing, when you don't have to use type framing, and how do we test some of those crazier ideas on the go, especially if the app is supposed to be used on the go. I'm gonna show you our flow diagrams, our hierarchy strips, our wireframes, and a lot of the work and thought processes that went into making a modern, beautiful digital product that the customer was really happy with. Story Planet Go is a travel app that creates guides in different areas of the world, mostly cities. You download the app and then you pick where you want to go, and once you're there, you get a step-by-step directions between various points of interest and some information about it. Now, we got to this project when V1 was already coded. It wasn't really published yet, but it was created, but the client wasn't happy with that version, so they came to us for a redesign. And when going into a redesign, you can't just try to change some fonts and colors and call it a day. You need to figure out whether the app is even doing what it was supposed to do in the first place. And to do that, you need to fully understand what the client and the business wants and needs. You can do it on just a typical call, but we have a slightly different approach. We start async, and then we try to understand how the client explains the product and create a simple flow diagram of the main payment loop of the product. In this case, this is basically downloading the app, getting a tour, paying for it, and then just doing it over and over again. And the purpose for this is that if we miss something, if let's say we do it wrong, then it might mean that the communication on the client side is not fully fleshed out yet, because if we don't understand it as designers, then how will the users understand it? Luckily, this time it worked perfectly, and our flow diagram was exactly what they wanted. But when you start with a flow like that, you need to expand it. You need to figure out what are the other less important functionalities all around it and nail those as well. So we created a couple of, let's say, rather complex flows with subflows and subcategories everywhere. We have our own unique ways of annotating some parts of those hand-sketched flows, but let's talk about it some other time. All those exercises before any visual design was made allowed us to actually simplify the information architecture. We were able to remove about 20% of the screens while keeping the same functionality. And that is always great, because less clicks or less steps always means that the customer will get to what they want faster. Once we had all the flows, we started sketching some of them as low fidelity wireframes just to make sure that all the information that's on those screens is absolutely necessary. And we tried to convince the client to remove some stuff from the forms, to maybe remove some stuff from even the detail pages. Like, do we really need that? Is that really necessary for the user? And asking those questions early on allowed us to make a much cleaner, simpler interface. Now we're going to talk about what probably everybody here was waiting for, the visual side. And yes, we are kind of known for making pretty products, but that doesn't happen until all those initial things are nailed and we understand each other correctly with the client. We need to understand the business very well before we start to jump into the visuals. When talking to the client, we outlined a couple of words that would be defining the new interface. They were fresh, modern, and a friendly vibe, but not just a friendly interface, a friendly vibe. And that's something that's not exactly the same. When working on the visuals, we always start with the most complex screens, and in many cases we start with a type frame, just to be sure that we are on the same page also in terms of marketing copy, and in many cases we suggest some of that marketing copy ourselves. Obviously, type framing works best for static pages that are not really changing in the app to different types of content, so things like login page with all the communication around it, or why should you register, or why should you buy this little plan over here. And typeframing is pretty great because it allows you to think about the copy and the structure without focusing too much on the colors themselves. It's a little bit like a wireframe, but with proper typography. And that is very good when you're working with a marketing team, because they don't really get like those classic low fidelity wireframes. But once they see the proper font sizes and font hierarchy, it's a lot better for them on the client side to come up with some better ideas for us. This speeds up the collaboration significantly. And normally, you don't really do dynamic pages typeframing. So we don't really do a type frame for a detailed page of a trip, one that looks kind of like this. But in this case, we actually did, because we realized that we got some input from the client. We got the data that would go onto that page. But if we do it as a type frame, we might come up with what to add or what to remove or what to kind of swap around for the best possible experience. And this has proven to be really helpful in defining the final state and the final visual of that screen, which is, by the way, the most important screen in the app. We did a couple of those initial most difficult screens in high fidelity, but before showing them to the client, we decided to take a little walk. And we walked around our own city after first creating those screens for a fictional trip around that city. That allows us to feel kind of connected to it in a much bigger way. And also, we were able to check how the app performs once you're walking, how readable stuff is, and is it like too bright, too dark? Basically all those things in terms of fonts, colors, even the button sizes, because if you're walking, you're kind of rocking your hand and your body, a little bit. So is it comfortable enough to push a button, or is it too small? We quickly realized that the path that we've chosen here with not a lot of decoration was a good one, because you don't want distractions where you're in a loud, busy environment. However, if we went completely like modern flat design, it would have been boring. We wanted that friendly vibe, and I'm gonna stress that a lot in this video. That friendly vibe has to come with some little quirky detail. It's not supposed to be everything quirky and weird and crazy, but something a little bit out of the ordinary. So like we've seen a lot of very nice looking modern minimal apps. In case of Airbnb, the quirk is in some of the micro interactions and animations and those cute little characters and rooms. This adds that additional level of delight. In this case, we went with a crazy font. And it's not really like super crazy, but it's crazy enough for the titles to look completely different than what you would expect from an app like this. And that quirky font, combined with some beautiful dynamic blurring of the background as you scroll, allowed us to create that little delight of an experience once you started to use the app. That blur animation also added a much needed plasticity to the interface. We didn't want it to be too minimal, but we also didn't want it to be too decorative. And that fading blur allows us to keep it minimal, keep a lot of the white space, but having a lot of beautiful photos, and that's what the app actually has, allows you to kind of experiment with how you can put them further in the background and make the most prominent content on the front shine. Then we picked a consistent and friendly looking icon set, but obviously some icons weren't really fitting what we needed. And in that case, many designers just pick an icon that's kind of close enough to the functionality. Well, we don't do it that way. We take an icon that's close enough and then modify it until it's exactly what we want. We modify it manually, but obviously if you have a consistent set that's already picked, you need to modify it so it still stays consistent. So we kept the same corner radius, we kept the same icon thickness or line thickness. We kept it basically as consistent as possible by adding some of the custom icons to the set. And by the way, I talk a lot about the best design practices in my web design courses and my boring UI course. 10,000 people already have it. Go check it out. Overall, we redesigned over 60 screens, then added about 30 more for some edge cases, because obviously we always need to design for edge cases. For example, what happens if the title is very short or extremely long? How will the interface react, and is it not gonna break anything? And in some cases it did, so we have to find a contingency and a way to fix that. Then we handed it off to the developers, which were on the client side, and waited for the first iteration, because obviously if you hand over the design, you're not done yet. As a designer, we're fully responsible for both delivering the product and also making sure that it's coded the right way. We checked every little interaction, every little screen, gave some feedback, but luckily this time the developers were actually good. Sadly, it's not the norm. About 90% of coded designs have, like most of them, completely wrong. Misaligned, bad font choices, bad sizes. It's all over the place. That's because many developers don't really see design and understand design. They kind of do it roughly in a direction of the design. And obviously that's our job to then look at it and provide corrections and fixes. Then we did some studies with some of their initial power users or power clients and tweaked the app some more. We parsed the data from the interviews with those power users and then basically outlined for the developers what they need to fix. It allowed us to save a lot of time and make the app better, faster. We also just relaunched our agency website, Squareblack, on which we're gonna be adding a lot of case studies in the very near future that go in depth on how we work and why we do some things the way we do, including our very own unique methods that most companies are only now trying to catch up to. We still have some client slots open, but not many. So if you want to work with us, just go to the site and book a call. And we do have a couple of audit slots, basically us looking at your design and telling you what you can fix yourself if you have your own designers. This design truly is beautiful, and I hope you liked it as much as we liked creating it. So now, you go and have a beautiful day. Cheers.